The following presentation is brought to you by kmmedia.pro. Please visit kmmedia.pro for more information. Now stay right where you are as we present. Welcome to Positive Talk Radio, evolving ideas, one conversation at a time. Great guests, dynamic stories and interviews, plus new thoughts on a wide range of topics and concepts. I hope that you'll hang with me, Kevin McDonald, my friends, and of course, you. As together we work to understand why we are all here and what we can do to make our world a better place for all of us. To be happy, be kind, and live in peace together. Yep, that's Positive Talk Radio. Everybody, to another episode of Positive Talk Radio. I gotta tell you, this is going to be a great episode. I hope you'll stay for the entire time. We've got two wonderful people with us today, and they're both authors. They're both PhDs. They also, I think, if they're not married, they're doing up writing. Oh, they are married. Okay, good.
Oh, yeah. Like 30 years and counting.
See, that's one of those things these days, you just don't know how to ask. And stuff, but they're authors, they're co-authors, they write together. They've got some great books out. The one that we're going to talk about a lot is called, and the next one is Nothing Bad Between Us, which is more of a mother-daughter story. I do believe, isn't that right?
That one's a father-daughter story.
Oh, father-daughter. Oh, that's
the third book is more about mothers and daughters.
I tell you, that is a really important.
That's right.
That's the fourth book.
That's the fourth book.
She gets confused.
Well, when you're a prolific writer like you guys are, it just kind of fades away. But I was looking at your reviews for Called and on Amazon, and you've got over 50 reviews, which is, I do a lot of authors and talk to a lot of folks, and 50 is a lot of reviews, which means that you've stirred the interest of a lot of people enough that they want to write in and put a review on it. And it's 4.5 stars. So you're done.
We'll take that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Marlena Fiol, is that right? Marlena Fiol, and I can say Ed O'Connor. That I can do. So welcome to the show, you guys. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Kevin. It's great to be here.
We're going to have a good time because we're going to talk about you. And in the beginning of the show, I mentioned that that we're all interested to know why we're all here. What are we here to do? What is the purpose of our existence and stuff? And you guys are delving deep into that subject matter, aren't you?
Yeah, and we don't have an answer for sure. We're always becoming is what it looks like to me.
Yeah.
Every time I get an answer, it just leads to more questions.
I think that's the beauty of it, isn't it? It's all part of the journey. It's not the destination, because as long as we're pursuing and moving forward, the destination keeps changing.
Yes.
And I would also just add to that, as an introduction to our conversation today, that not only are we all becoming, in my view, but when we talk about purpose, sometimes people think big visionaries or extraordinary people, and I can't do that because I'm not one of those extraordinary people. And so I think one of the other messages for all of us is that we ordinary, flawed people can make a difference. And the book Called that we're going to be discussing today, among others, I think that's a real exemplar of flawed and very human people making an extraordinary difference. And what a great inspiration for all of us.
None of us, well, there may have been one of us that was perfect, but the rest of us, I'm afraid, are not. And we're all trying to do the best that we can. Well, let me ask you guys, because there are people, and I'm sure that you've had people in your existence that are not really aware. They're not really focused on what they can do, why they're here, what's it all about. And they're just living day to day, yesterday is the same as tomorrow, and they're not really concerned with it. Um, what makes you different than that? What makes you concerned with why you're here? What are we here to do? And that, is there a background there that we should know about?
I'm going to give you an answer that's not going to be very fulfilling. I just feel incredibly blessed. I don't feel I did anything to deserve being thrown into the questions. I feel guided. I don't understand why, but I'm incredibly grateful for it.
That's grateful is the word of the day, because we should all be grateful for who we are, the existence that we have, and the people that we meet. And you're right when we're talking about the little people versus the big people. I don't think there is such a thing. I think we're just all people, and everybody has the opportunity to do with their life what they choose, if they choose to do it. But there seems to be a barrier there, that some folks just don't feel like. Well, as an example, you've written 4 books. You're both PhDs. You've spent a lot of time in school. You have had a great life, and you continue to have a great life. But it's not all cupcakes and roses for you, I wouldn't imagine.
Well, and I was going to add to what Ed said, and I think gratitude is a huge part of the evolving journey that we're on. But there's something else that's really important, I think, and it addresses what you're talking about, Kevin. And we're jumping around a bit here in terms of the books we're discussing, but in the first book, the memoir, Nothing Bad Between Us, one of the messages there is that the hard knocks in life are actually what allow us to begin to wake up. And that was certainly the story of my life. And so when you say, what causes us to step back and ask these questions? I think one of the wake up calls are really tough times in life when one is on the ground and beaten down. And that's when one gets up and begins to, or at least that has been the story of my life.
Yeah, we got to find a new way at that point in time, just repeating and repeating that cycle of being beaten down. At least we can move on to the next beating rather than the same one over and over again.
Well, that's the thing. There are so many people that they keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result.
Yeah.
Which is, I guess, isn't that the definition of insanity?
So I've heard, for sure.
And and Dr. Marnie, who's tuning in right now, and there'll be some folks that'll tune in, and we'll put up their posts and stuff.
Hello, Dr. Marnie.
Always great to tune in to Moi of Positive Talk Radio, another in-depth and inspirational interview with Marlene and Ed. She's grateful. I had her on yesterday. She is an awesome lady as well. And then she also says, agree, the challenges in our lives are wake-up calls. I tend to believe that we are the sum total of all the experiences, both good and bad, that we've had in life.
There's more, though. We need to pay attention to those good and bad experiences.
I agree.
Right.
I agree. And learn from them. Yeah. Or as some people would say, remember what you already know. It depends on the kind of two schools of thought. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with another author, Neil Donald Walsh.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And from his perspective, we already know everything, but we have forgotten it. And so we are spending our time here remembering that we are all part of the global community and that we are all one.
Yes. You're saying we are all one is going to take me off just a little bit in another direction to another author that you may well be familiar with, Dr. Larry Dossey, who has written a book, One, and he's a New York Times bestseller for several other books. Remarkable human being. And what he did in the book One, which I think was the last book that he wrote, as far as we know, he pulled together evidence from many, many, many different fields supporting the idea that we are all connected, that we are all one, and that we are waking up to that.
Yeah. It is, I believe that it is the question of our day, and it is number one, it's timeless, but it's also very important for us to recognize, because if we recognize that we are all one, we're all made of the same stuff, regardless of the color of our skin or who we love or whatever, and that we are all part of the same human family, it would change how we view each other, I would think.
Kevin, how do we move based on the many guests you've had, and you're thinking about this for a long, long time? How do we move past being so insecure that we have to find somebody that we're better than? That there's always got to be somebody below us. How do we move past that? What is your experience of that?
I don't have, just like I don't know. I'd like to believe that by doing shows like this, by writing books like you have, by bringing out these issues, because 20 years ago, I had never heard the term "we are all one." When I heard that, it was startling to me, because it was like, I grew up in a Lutheran church and all of that, and there's us versus them, and it's the believers and the non-believers,
Yep.
and all of that. And then I came to realize that we are all one, but there are people that are not waking up to it. And so that's why this show exists, is to help people do that, and why your work exists, and why you feel called to do. Oh, that's the name of a book, I think. You feel called to do your work, is that the more of us put the message out there that is actually the truth, the more people will come together, and it will raise, and I've heard this often, it will raise the collective consciousness. Now, is there a group of people who refuse to accept the fact that a black person may be as good as a white person, or somebody that's gay or whatever? There's going to be those people, but I think over time, those people will either come to this side or they will go away. I don't know how that's going to play out. I hope it does.
Marlena and I were in the consulting speaking business together for 25 years or so before we retired into this current life that we're talking about. And we were one of the areas we worked in regularly was change management in organizational settings. And you always had the people who are way out front and the ones that were never coming. And what could we do to shift those who were not locked in at either end toward the changes that needed to be made? And it was kind of exciting work for us, for sure.
Oh, that's a big deal, what you guys were doing, because, and I know several people, and they are approaching that from the standpoint of going and talking to executives and CEOs and people that are managing these large organizations, and
Yes.
saying that what used to work doesn't work anymore, and you have to change your methods and methods of being to include everybody.
Yeah.
Is that kind of the work that you guys were doing?
It is.
Yeah, it's a good summary.
Yeah.
It's a good summary.
And
just to quote, you said they're going to executives. One executive that I am incredibly impressed with, and I'm not going to try his name because I will mispronounce it, but he's the CEO and chairman of the board of Microsoft. He got the CEO's job, and I think it was 2014, and the executive chairman came later. But he said, look, we're stodgy. We're locked into believing we already know. We can't do that anymore. What we have to do is grow. What we have to do is be open each day to learning. And so he's created a very different kind of an organization right out of that idea that we have to be awake and we have to be willing to see new possibilities.
And very important to what Ed just said, not knowing.
Yes.
Not knowing. I mean, how critical that
Yes.
is in today's world, when we all think we know and we can dump our knowing on other people and try to force them to know what we know. We've lost track of mystery and awe and learning to say, oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
It's just, we've lost that.
Yeah.
And what an amazing world this would be if I woke up in the morning to go, what am I going to learn today? What can awe me today and wow me that I don't know?
It would be remarkable if
Yeah.
people would wake up to that, just that all by itself,
Yeah.
and say, I don't know what I don't know, and I don't know what I think I know.
But I'm going to learn something.
I'm going to learn something, and I'm going to be open to it.
Yeah.
We could become learn-it-alls rather than know-it-alls, to use a cute set of words.
That's well, I would put that in a book.
I think it's going to be in an upcoming YouTube episode, probably.
Oh, good. Let's talk about it. Say, if somebody wants to visit you on YouTube, how do they get that done?
So the channel is Becoming Who We Truly Are.
Oh, I love that.
Very on topic in terms of what we're talking about today. So Marlena Fiol, Becoming Who We Truly Are. And we are a team in that process. I happen to be the face, but it is our joint production, and it goes up weekly.
And I'm a roadie, the guy who goes around and sets things up.
Well, it's remarkable that see, there are, now you've been doing this for 25, 30 years. What was it like 30 years ago?
We fought more, and it took longer to sort it out after each fight.
True. It's true.
It's sadly true.
We've always had a very fiery relationship, intense. I don't think we saw the value of that so much early on, and we got really stuck in our differences. And now we still have lots of differences, but I think I know that we both see, even in the middle of the differences, that this is going to work out, and it's going to work out to be better than it was, whatever we're arguing about. And it's usually the YouTube episode, or the writing, or the lighting for an episode.
I don't know why that light is there. It shouldn't be there.
But it results and we're more conscious during our that there's a reason for it, and things will be better because of it.
Do you find that in your work and talking to people and YouTube, that people are changing? That 30 years ago, 25 years ago, there was not as many. I mean, you had your Wayne Dyers and you had your Gary Zukoffs and they were trying, and Neil Donald Walsh's and those guys, they were trying to wake people up, but there was fewer of us than there seems to be now.
Yeah.
When we were working early on, before we even met, I can remember the controversial issue of and I don't want to point to my head, mind-body connection. And does what you think really make a difference in your own life? And it went on from there, obviously, to, oh yeah, obviously it does. Even more conservative traditionalists have come to understand that. But now the question, or maybe it was 10 years ago or so that I got fascinated with, was people saying, well, does what I think affect you? Oh, yes. And then there's phenomenal amount of evidence across space and time that it does.
I want to clarify, though. Do my thoughts directly impact you? Not through my behaviors.
Yeah.
But what I'm thinking
energetically
impacts you, Kevin, right here, right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not like we control you. That's a different question. You're not suggesting 100% impact. Oh, I can make you whatever. But there's an influence.
Yeah.
There is. It's a favorite story of mine. Before I did this, I did this, and then I had to go make some money, so I drove a bus for 12 years, and I came to understand, because of my background and stuff, that when I was driving the bus, I could directly impact the energy within the bus by my attitudes and by what I said and by what I did. If it was negative, the bus became angry. If it was positive, it was a lot more positive. So I like to try and convince people, not that I ever will, that or at least to tell them that the things that you do and think on a daily basis affects the planet in ways that you'll never know.
Yeah.
Yes.
And in people you'll never know.
Yeah.
Yes. Good summary.
Absolutely.
And a great example.
Yeah, and it was so true, because I remember distinctly one day I was in a really piss poor mood. I didn't want to be driving a bus. I was tired, and stuff, and I woke up about halfway through and said, "Why is everybody so pissed off?" And I looked at it and I said, "It's because I got this is because you're pissed off. And so you can directly impact everybody you meet, be it the grocery store, with the cashier, with doing the podcast, doing the YouTube. We can have a positive impact or a negative impact. We get to choose.
Yeah. Yeah.
So so you guys have been doing this for a long time. When did you decide to? Now you were public speakers, and I want to ask you about that. How did you get that gig? How did you guys start doing public speaking?
If I tell you the truth, it'll sound too strange to believe.
No, tell me the truth.
I'm just talking about myself. This is before we met. I was in the financial business. Enough, we'll just put that off to the side. I had financial security licenses and a principal's license and all that stuff, and I was in the wrong place. And I was walking around in a, I started to say junkyard. No, it was a dump. Basically, I was out walking in the night, I got to do something different. I've just got to do something different. Begging, I guess, for guidance. And it came to me, I want to be a public speaker. Now, I'd been standing up in front of university audiences. I've been a university professor for maybe 15, 20 years at the time, before the financial business. But this was different. This was something I just knew I wanted to do. Now, how do you get from wanting to having it happen?
A lot of practice and a lot.
Well, yeah, and you go around taking every freebie I could get my hands on, and the local chapter of the whatever that needs a speaker for Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. for their breakfast meeting, and I met some interesting people like you did on the bus. But then one of the people who came to me was the chairman of the healthcare program at the university I was working at. And he said, I hear you do a little of the speaking stuff. Would you come talk to the Rocky Mountain Financial something association a month from now? And I said, sure, I'll do that. And so I did. And somebody came up afterward and said, Ed, I don't think you've talked to financial audiences very much because you don't quite have the lingo right. But you're a good speaker, but you don't have the right. It's about a month later when this man who headed up the university healthcare program, I can still see him standing in my office door saying, I heard that was really good what you did. Would you like to do that for money? I can hook you up with. And he did hook me up with, and it became the biggest source of work over 20 years, 25 years. Now, a lot of other sources came, but that is now, can I explain? No, that's being gifted. That's being guided.
I believe that when we show up where we believe we need to be in life and what we need to be doing, that things come our way to support that. I really do believe it. And this is one example of that. We need to show up, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And it is so true, because be it I interview musicians, authors, speakers, poets, a lot of different folks that are, and animal communicators and psychics, and to a person, there was a point in time when they suddenly had what I would call a download, a inspiration would be another way to use it. You were inspired, because I believe that your team on the other side said, Ed, I think now's the time for you to take all this experience that you've got and to put it to use, in a way that we want you to use it.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yep. No problem with that at all. I'll tell you about another epiphany if I can. This one will be quicker and it'll sort of take us back toward maybe what we're here to talk about a little bit. So we both retired in 2015, 16, something like that, from our university, and shut down the business. And then the question becomes, what do you do next? And Marlena, she was going to be a guitar player, and she played with that for a little bit. And I didn't have any capability or interest. And then she said something about maybe photography. And so that gave me a great thing to buy gifts for Marlena. I can go buy all this equipment. She said, no more with that. And we're in our living room. We lived in Tucson, Arizona, part of the time each year. And we're sitting in our living room in Tucson. And she said to me, hey, would you listen to something? I just sort of wrote it. And she's just pecking it out on a keyboard. This is straight out of the keyboard. And it is in the opening chapter of her memoir, Nothing Bad Between Us. And I was blown away. I didn't know she could write like that. We can write academic articles. We were pretty good at that. We wrote academic books. But this is a different kind of writing. And that's a download kind of moment. I mean, I knew that's what we ought to be doing right there. And so that's now been 4 or 5 years.
For 6 years.
6 years doing the research, getting ready for these books. A lot of research went into them.
You know, it's for those of you that are nearing our age, and although I'm 64 and you're 65 or 66, I think.
Yeah.
Add another 10 years
or
to
at
that.
10 and a half or
more.
here.
But when you retire, because I watched my dad retire, and he retired he was an executive for Nordstrom. He worked 6 days a week.
Yeah.
He was an executive. He was the guy that would walk into a department that he was manager of, and the manager would say, "Mr. McDonald's coming, Mr. McDonald's coming," and everybody would scurry around. He was that kind of guy. I mean, he was a corporate executive. But when he retired, his whole life was wrapped up in being a corporate executive.
Yes.
And so when he retired, he had nothing else to go to. So he played golf for a while, and then he fell and hurt his hip, so he couldn't play golf anymore. So then he had nothing. So I highly recommend that people do exactly what you did, is to go and find something that you're passionate about and go do it. And you'll be good at it. Maybe not as good as you, but whatever it is.
You just said something really important from my point of view. Be passionate about it.
Yeah, the guitar thing, the photography, golf, they're all nice. But it didn't fire us up. And
people who are passionate enthusiastically put in more time and energy. People who are passionate about something will outperform people who are, that's what I ought to be doing. That seems like a good idea because other people are doing it.
Well, and I'm retired now. The interesting story about how that happened is that the good Lord or whoever, the universe, said, "No, you're done. You're gonna." So they made me fall a couple of times and have a couple of surgeries. So I couldn't drive a bus anymore. But I'd already started the podcast, and I had, be careful what you wish for, because I had said at one point, "Gosh, I wish I could just retire so that I could just do the podcast, because that's what I love to do." And so they made that possible.
Yeah.
And
here you are.
And here I are, and I do 8 to 10 to 12 of these a week, including live radio on KKNW in Seattle. I'd love to have you on that show, because you guys you speak exactly the language that I think we all need to go to if we're going to ever get along and take care of each other.
Yeah. And the world is crying for that now. It just is sobbing for it with the latest tragedy in Texas. It just
goes on and on.
There is such longing for what we are talking about that we need to get there. Yeah.
I used to be a news junkie. I can't watch the news anymore. I'll watch maybe 10 or 15 minutes of it, and that's all I can take, between Ukraine and Buffalo and Texas and 18-year-old kids buying assault weapons and killing children.
Yes. And their grandmother.
And the agony that must be in the soul of that 18-year-old is just, we're losing our kids. We're not taking care of our young people. We're not taking care of our old people very well, but more importantly, I think we're not taking care of our kids. And so the tragedy of what he did is terrible. I also look at his soul and where that came from and how we are failing those kids as a society.
And as an example, in 2021, more people died of opioid overdoses than ever, and it was close to 1 million people in this country, and you don't hear about those things, and how we as a collective society and this is actually more political than I generally get, but as a collective society, we need to take care of each other. We got 16 million kids going to bed hungry. We've got people that are homeless. We've got enough money. We could do it. But if we but then, to circle back, if we would recognize that we are all one, we would have a different place in time about how we thought about all of that.
Yeah. And we would be better equipped to speak with each other across the aisle about what needs to get done to make this happen.
I was shocked when after Texas, when they showed a montage of, I don't care about parties, but political leaders that were saying nothing. Nothing can be done. It's just the way it is. They were just crazy, and that's just the way it's going to be. And it's like, we can't accept that. Yeah. We can't accept that, because you're right. That young man was a tortured person as well.
Absolutely.
You know, so, but anyway, let's talk about something positive, like your book.
All right, let's pick it up a little here.
Tell me about Called. What was the motivation?
It is an epic saga that spans 60 years. It is a story of romance, of adventure, of service. It is
a little political intrigue
about some political intrigue. It takes place in South America, so there's quite a bit of Paraguayan and Argentinian history. It begins in 1941 during World War II. A young pioneering doctor takes off and goes to an unknown part of Western Paraguay that is a land where no one could live except, at that time, the belief was no one could live there except the nomad indigenous tribes that were there. And he was there to be a pioneering doctor for a group of immigrants who had just come over from the Ukraine. These are Mennonites who emigrated from the Ukraine to Paraguay in 1930, and they had no doctor. So this is where the story begins.
Now, why would they go to a part of the world where nobody supposedly could live? Because there was no other country in the world that would accept them.
Many of them were very ill. They had trachoma. 2/3 of them had eye disease, trachoma. And so Paraguay opened its doors to these people because they wanted someone to inhabit the western part of Paraguay that was considered.
They wanted to lay claim to it because there was a war with Bolivia. And if we can put our people out there, maybe we can claim the land better than those Bolivians can. So everybody's got their own motives in the world.
So our protagonist lands in the middle of this in 1941. These are Mennonites who claim to be pacifists, but they in fact are burning with Nazi fervor because they believe Hitler will get them back to where they came from. They
take the land.
They can't live in this hellhole in Paraguay. They want to get back to the Ukraine, and Hitler is going to help them get there. And so here is Dr. Schmidt in the middle of a Mennonite community, barely surviving in a desert, and the Nazi flames that are burning hot. So that's where the story begins.
Why don't we let him in for a minute?
Yeah.
No. You're really good, because I was going to ask you, first of all, I'm unfamiliar with the doctrine of a Mennonite. What do they believe?
So there are many splintering Mennonite groups. So I don't think that any one definition really, there are some beliefs that I can talk about that I think all groups adhere to. One is pacifism, even though there are some exceptions even to that rule. So they become conscientious objectors in wars because they believe taking up arms is against their religion. Another is the separation of church and state. But there are so many different Mennonite groups. I think what our viewers and listeners will often think about when they hear Mennonite are the Amish. And these are the people who still ride in buggies and they wear the little hats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or old Mennonites.
And also the old Mennonite traditions with the hats and the long garb. the Mennonites that we're talking about are not the old Mennonites or the Amish. However, they are still plain people. They believe in plain lifestyle. They believe in hard work, in pacifism. And so there are some underlying beliefs that are true across Mennonites.
Except they wanted Hitler to take them back to Ukraine. And so they were fervent about that because they thought that he would do that.
Absolutely. It's kind of like us talking about this 18-year-old who shot kids. My father used to say, and my father is the protagonist of this book we're talking about, Dr. Schmidt used to say, anyone is capable of anything. And part of this, I'm sure, stemmed from him living this incredulous time when Mennonites had Nazi fervor. I mean, the two would seemingly not possibly go together. And yet these people were so desperate to get back to their Heimatland that they believed Hitler would get them there. And I think it's so true. We don't want to see that, but any of us is capable of anything under the right circumstances.
Oh, I agree. I agree. And Hitler actually is a pretty good example. Now, you're learned people, and you've studied history quite a little bit. And when he came to power, he was under the impression that the Germans had been abused because of World War One. Their army was not allowed to be there. They weren't fully functioning society, and he wanted to bring their pride back into the country. To be German was to be a good thing. He just took it way too far.
That's right. But it was he fed into that vulnerability in a way that was absolutely brilliant. Yeah.
Yes, and that's how he got so many people to follow him willingly, because they thought we're going to reassume our rightful place in the world.
That's right.
So when you look at it from his perspective, he wasn't such a bad guy, and except when he started killing people and putting them in but yeah.
And the way the Mennonites handled it in those first few years of World War II was denial of the
Holocaust, because there were already reports in 45 and 40. In 44 and 45, the world knew what was going on, but there was still so much denial going on about it, which also is just a very human. We do this.
Their language was German. They had
gotcha.
The Mennonites started in the Netherlands and worked their way on across Germany, and this group moved on to the Ukraine, but they never gave up their German language, and so the propaganda came in German to Paraguay. And Argentina, for that matter. And Dr. Schmidt, Dr. John's down there. Oh, he's got an American sponsor. And of course, Mennonite Central Committee, they're way opposed to Nazism. And they've got him down there in the middle of this fire supporting the American perspective, the U.S. perspective.
Oh, gotcha. Gotcha. Now, the book is named Called. What was he called to do?
Oh, great question.
Well, on the face of it, much has been written about, this is a true story. So Dr. John and Clara Schmidt spent 60 plus years of their lives in Paraguay doing just incredible service of one kind or another. And what has been written about them is that they were called to do God's work. They were devout Mennonites, and they believed that God was calling them to do this work. We also know from diaries and letters from their own personal writing that they were called to the crazy adventure of it all. And so it's an interesting mix. When God calls and adventure calls, that's very potent. That's a potent combination there. And that's really what we see going on for 60 plus years throughout this story, is a mix of God and adventure and risk-taking, absolute crazy risk taking
To contribute.
and a desire to contribute.
Yeah.
I mean, that was God's
they were
calling.
not there to make a ton of money, although they did invest wisely in Paraguayan land, but they turned the money back in terms of contribution.
You know, at the
during
beginning
their
of your
lives.
show, and at the beginning of this show, Kevin, we can make this world a better place.
Yes.
I saw that caption, and if there were ever two people who inspire each of us to make the world a better place, it would be John and Clara Schmidt. That was their guiding light, their North Star.
And so they could legitimately say that they were called by God, the universe, whatever, to do that, because that was their passion.
It was their
Absolutely.
passion. Yeah.
And they were working hard. And because from what I understand, from what you said, Paraguay was not a very nice place.
It was not. It was a very difficult place. It's an old Spanish outpost, once very important Spanish outpost. Not the part of Paraguay that Dr. John went to, but Asunción, the capital. It may be even wise to point out where it is. People will be looking at a map going, Paraguay, is that Uruguay? Is that, I don't know.
So Paraguay sits, it's a small landlocked country that sits is in the center, slightly south and in the center of South America. So it's south of Brazil.
North of Argentina, east of Bolivia.
And west of Uruguay. And so
Yeah.
it's landlocked. Many people, when they hear Paraguay, think Uruguay, and they are not at all the same.
So I was just thinking, why would you want to have a landlocked country? And I guess it's because nobody else wanted the land, so they decided they would take it and build a community there, or build
Not exactly.
There were crazy wars
Yeah.
in South America about getting land across on the coasts. And so the Triple Alliance War was in the 1870s, which was Paraguay against
Argentina, Brazil, and maybe Chile,
and
or Brazil,
Bolivia. So little Paraguay fighting these big countries.
And then it became a much smaller Paraguay after they got their butts beat. And so that's where they are now.
So it ended up, because of a lot of wars, this ended up being the configuration.
Now, you studied quite a bit about South American history. We don't hear this, and I was a student of history, but I don't recall in school that they talked much about South American history and what went on there. It was a pretty bloody, brutal time back then.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Down there.
Yeah.
And even during the time that this book covers, in the 1940s,
Where it starts.
Yeah, the war with Bolivia was pretty darn brutal, and so
It was still going on.
Yeah, it was still going on when at the time this book was written. And then, of course, the political machinations of Argentina, Evita Perón, and that all also is part of CALD. It's part of I think Argentina's history people are a little more familiar with, and that is also woven into the story.
One piece. I'm sorry, Kevin, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to ask. So now, was Dr. John, was he your father?
Yes.
Oh, very cool. So it's a real live story.
It's a real live story based on, what do we have? 6 boxes of books and
720 references for the book that we've chosen out of the vast material. There was a lot written by them, so we have their inside perspective, but there is a very large accumulation of work written about them or written by them that's in libraries and archives. We were also fortunate to be able to interview people who were still alive and remembered them. And so and when a book like this gets out, people start coming out of the woodwork who go, yeah, we gave money to...
So one of the
keep their work going.
One of the things they're best known for, we haven't even touched on yet. In 1951, they founded and for 20 years managed a leprosy compound. And what they are best known for, recognized by the World Health Organization, the American Leprosy Missions, is that they revolutionized how leprosy is treated on the planet today. So when they began their leprosy work, what what happened is that lepers, as they were called, were.
Her father would have gone nuts if he heard the word leper. These were not people, they were not lepers.
They were people, dignified people like you and I, who have an illness called Hansen's disease or leprosy. But at that time, in 1951, lepers were locked up like animals into colonies. And even though there was not yet a lot of evidence that, I mean, at that time, it was not known how the disease was transmitted. But there was already a sulfa available that would halt the symptoms of the disease. And Dr. John believed that people, given the sulfone that was available, people should be treated in their homes and they should be kept in their families. And that is the way leprosy is treated on the planet today. And
with drugs that have come into fruition since then, or have shown up since then. He didn't have any idea what caused leprosy. I mean, he had some ideas, but there was no evidence. So this man and his wife took this 2-month-old child to Paraguay, along with 4 of her siblings that were all alive at the time, and took them to live among people who had leprosy, the most illness, the sickest
of them.
That's the word I couldn't come up with.
The ones with the most severe illness who couldn't take care of themselves at home, we treated on the compound where I grew up.
And in your home.
And even in our beds before the clinic was built.
People must have thought that you were absolutely crazy.
Well, they thought my father.
Maybe they were right. It's possible.
He was pretty crazy. He also
makes him fascinating.
Yeah, it was a combination of crazy and brilliant and
believing,
and underneath it all, believing in the dignity of all human beings. He would not have had the words "We are one," Kevin, but he lived by that rule.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That is awesome. By the way, when are you writing your autobiography?
Well, the first book that I wrote was my memoir. And so that is Nothing Bad Between Us. And it...
say a few words about that.
Yeah, my brilliant father and I had a very difficult relationship when I was a child.
She has a personality very much like her father's.
I drove him nuts, and he beat me until I was bloody. We had a very, very bad relationship. The book, however, my memoir, is not so much about that. It is much more about the journey toward reconciliation and toward forgiveness. And so it's a book that traces that journey from the broken child that I was to healing and forgiveness.
I'm going to probe her. The name of the book really is about a certain Low German. She speaks 5 languages. Low German and High German are 2 of the 5.
So my mother tongue is Low German, which is what I'm going to back up a little bit. So my parents grew up in Paraguay, but my father's people came from the Ukraine, which is exactly where the people came from who then later immigrated to Paraguay. So he was really going to help his people in Paraguay.
And their native language is
Low German, which is Plotich. And so when my father and I, it's a long journey, so I'm now abbreviating it. So we get to a point where so much healing has occurred between us. It's 1988, and we're sitting on their squeaky sofa, and there's a lot in Kansas. There are a lot of people around, family members speaking a lot of different languages, because we married people who only spoke English or only Spanish or only German. So there was a lot of sentences
start in one language and they end in another language, and they don't notice it happened.
So there's all this chaos happening, and my father and I are sitting on the sofa, and I turn to him and I grab his hand and I said, "Du hast nichts zwischen uns." And what that means in Plotich, in Low German, is nothing bad between us. And he turned to me and he said, "Nee, Du hast nicht verstanden. And from then on, that was what we said to each other at every goodbye for the next 20 years until he died. Du hast nicht verstanden. And so I couldn't make that the title, since what would North Americans do with a title, Du hast nicht verstanden? So I put the translation, Nothing Bad Between Us, as the title of my memoir.
It's a beautiful story of reconciliation and the path to reconciliation.
That's a beautiful story. Do you guys recognize that this needs to be a 2 or 3 hour podcast just so that we can talk about everything that you've done in your lives and how impactful that you have been? And
You're very kind.
No, I'm very truthful, because you guys, even the book Nothing Bad Between Us, somebody in this country picked that book up and they read it because they were having the same issues that you were having with your father. And
it's so true, Kevin. The outpouring that we've received is really testament to the fact that, yes, this is a story about a kid growing up on a leprosy compound in Paraguay in a low German Mennonite community. And it's a universal story of healing, of brokenness and healing. And the outpouring has been about how people will say, your story's not at all like mine, but oh my gosh, it's like mine.
Yeah.
do you know that if this wasn't true and wasn't your memoir, people would have said, no, you're making all that stuff up, and nobody would buy it because it's too outlandish.
Yeah.
Nobody. I mean, you grew up in a leper colony in Uruguay. You're
Paraguay. Careful.
No, sorry, thanks.
Couldn't resist. Sorry.
No, that's all right. I don't speak one language very well, by the way. Just so you'd like to know.
She corrects my English on an ongoing basis. Her fifth language. It's not bad.
So it's your story is remarkable. And your dad, how old did he live to be?
He was 94 when he died.
2003.
He died in 2003. Yeah.
That was a big year for this country in 2003. And for the last 20 years of your life, you had reconciled with him and things were good. What did he think? Because I'm always interested in older folks, or you as well.
We're older folks.
Yet in that, what you've seen in your life and the changes that have happened since you were a child till now, I'm beginning to realize how vital a time that we are living in and how much change is happening. What give us, because we're gonna have to wrap this up in a minute, but I would love your philosophy of life that you've gained over time that you would like to share with our audience, because it's vitally important that younger people have an opportunity to talk to people who have been on the planet a while.
Boy, I don't know the answer to that one.
I think it's a great point that you're making. We have young grandsons who are 12 and 15.
Yeah.
And we hardly know how to speak their language.
Yes, I know. It's hard.
And so
they're very kind to us.
And so we often have this conversation, Ed and I, about what can we share with them? And I don't know that I have an answer to what you are asking, Kevin, but I will say that we think about it and we talk about it, and we're not sure what our role is or what we can say or what is meaningful to them to hear. They don't want to hear that we walked 5 miles in the snow going to school and back.
Uphill both directions.
Or whatever
Yeah.
But it's a great question that you're posing, and I don't know that we have an answer.
No, and if we did, it wouldn't be the same answer we had 4 or 5 years ago, and hopefully it won't be the same answer we have 4 or 5 years from now. I can tell you that what I'm working on, because I don't do it terribly well, I don't do it well at all, is kindness and gratitude. And I'm finding those incredibly important in my life right now. And
but I think Kevin was asking about what we
kindness
learned
and gratitude
about having lived as long as we have.
and that falls under that category.
Yeah.
Kindness and gratitude, and gratitude for the lives that we're living, the things that we've done. Because remember, and I keep, do you know 1990 was 32 years ago? I find that just remarkable. That it seems like it was like yesterday, but your 15-year-old grandson was born in 2007.
It's just crazy. It's crazy. Yeah.
And so he doesn't know things like if I said to you, photomat, you would know what I'm talking about the little building where you would go and have your pictures developed. Stuff
Sure.
doesn't exist today.
Right.
Or Blockbuster, or or
The world couldn't live without it, right?
yeah, or the fact that we didn't, in 2000 nobody had a cell phone.
That's right. Oh,
And
2007 comes the iPhone, the contribution of the departed gentleman, and it's changed the world. And the cloud technology that allows it to operate and allows us to have this conversation across space and time. I mean, we came out with a book about the time the pandemic hit. Well, what are we going to do? We can't go to bookstores and speak, which would be the normal thing.
Instead, we speak to people like you.
All over the world now, as opposed to locally where I can drive to and speak.
And I agree with you. What's interesting about that is I talked to a guy that he books himself. He's a magician, and he books himself all over the world. And he's a comic / magician. Now he does his stuff via Zoom, and so he doesn't have to get into his car, go to the airport, get into an airplane, fly to Minneapolis, wherever he's going, stay in a hotel, stay all night, and then do his gig the next day, and then get into an airplane. And I think it's going to help the planet because we're not use all of the resources, because we can do this. Right. I'm sitting in my house in SeaTac, Washington, and you are in. Are you in Arizona today?
We're in Eugene, Oregon.
But did you even ask where we are? You don't need to ask. We're here.
Right.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, we're in Eugene, Oregon, to answer your question.
Beautiful area. Beautiful area.
Gorgeous. Yeah. And this is a great time of year there. I'm going to go back full circle if I can, because I know we're coming toward an end, Kevin, because you said so. The football coach that I remember so well, that you may be old enough to remember, Vince Lombardi.
Oh,
absolutely. Who was the Green Bay Packers' phenomenally successful football coach. And one of the quotes from, and I'm going to take it back to Called, one of the quotes that I like from Mr. Lombardi is something to the effect of, we would accomplish many more things if we did not believe they were impossible. That's exactly right. That's the story of Dr. John and Clara Schmidt in Called. They didn't understand things were impossible. In their 80s, they took on responsibility for a failing hospital and a failing community in a remote area on the opposite side of Paraguay from where they started, way out far east. Today, that is a thriving hospital and, as far as we know, a thriving community. But it wouldn't be there without what they did. Now, this is people in their 80s. They didn't know they couldn't do it, so they just went and did it. Remarkable people.
I gotta ask you both. At the end of his life, when he looked back on it, did he recognize and realize the scope of what he had done?
No, Kevin, and where you're taking us without knowing it is to the book that we are
number 3.
Book number 3, that
not 4, 3
that we have nearly completed a draft of. So it will be it'll be out within the year, and it's a book that traces the inner journey of Dr. John. He is, by all accounts, a tragic hero because he changed the world with his extraordinary contributions, but he was unable to face his own inner demons, and he was unable to look at the accomplishments with satisfaction. What he saw at the end of his life was his own broken down uselessness. And
you have got to be kidding.
No, and that's what we're exploring in this.
That's what we're exploring, and it's a tragic, but we're going to hopefully write it as an inspirational story again about the possibilities we have while we are here, while we are alive, to really nurture our souls, our inner lives, while we are making a difference out in the world, so that we can gracefully and gratefully move into old age, not as broken, sad people, but rejoicing about what has been and what continues to be and what can be. And so the book hopefully will be an inspiration, but underneath it all, yes, he was a tragic hero.
And I just want you to know that I have thoroughly enjoyed creating this podcast with you and the conversation that we've had. And you have inspired me with your work and who you are and your stories. It's just a remarkable thing. Can I beg you to come back and do some more?
I don't know if we know anymore. Did we use it all up? I'm not sure.
Once
it's a pleasure to be with you, Kevin.
Once Healing the Wound is out, we'd love to come and talk to you again about reactions to that book. That would be great fun.
Absolutely. And I also want to introduce you to my audience on KKNW, which is in Seattle. It's a over-the-air broadcast, and it's the 14th largest media market in the country. And I think you would have a lot of value to that audience.
We'd love to do that. And for anyone who would like to get updates on the release of our next book, if they subscribe to our website at marlenafiol.com, and I assume you will provide that in show notes.
Yes, ma'am, I will. But if you go to, her last name is spelled Fiol, and Marlena Fiol, and you can get the information you need there. By the way, you're not hard to find. You're all over the place. So go check them out. Even if you just start with the name of the book, which is called. It's done very, very well. It's got lots of great reviews, and you guys should be very proud of who you are.
Oh, you're kind. Thank you, Kevin.
We're privileged and feel very blessed doing what we're doing together.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And we'd love to speak with you anytime, Kevin. It's a pleasure and an honor.
Well, thank you. And Holly Berry says, I'd love to know from my seniors what thing consistently help to ease anxiety for humans.
We play Tai Chi every day.
That's what I was going to say. We are devoted. I mean, it reduces falls in older people by over 50%. It is an incredible opportunity to learn.
It's a moving meditation.
It's a moving meditation. So we've done a lot of other meditation, but that's an important
Tai Chi.
one.
See, and you said that we had no more to talk about. We could spend a whole hour talking about that.
Well, I'd love to.
We'd love to.
We are enthused, and we have a master.
You won't get us. You won't get to stop us.
Dr. Paul.
Dr. Paul Lamb.
Dr. Paul Lamb, L-A-M.
Is our
master. He is a physician. He is brilliant as a human being. I'm sorry.
We need to stop. Yeah, it's going to be hard to shut us up.
Well,
yeah. Well,
he's a great guy.
And I would not, except I've scheduled another podcast for the top of the hour. So I have to, sadly, I have to wrap it up. I don't want to, because you guys are so much fun, but I really, truly want you to know that you are having an impact in the world in a very positive way, and keep doing what you're doing. And
thank you, Kevin.
Thank you,
you
Kevin.
as well. Keep doing your good work.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Yes.
I have no choice. I have got to.
You're called.
You're called.
That's exactly right, doggone it. And all I hope for is that at the end of our lives that we can look back at a life well lived, and we've done everything within our power to do the best we can. That's all you can ask for.
That's right.
Be well.
Thank you, you two, and go get the book called. Just wait right there. I'll be right back. Thanks for enjoying this episode all the way to the end. Please give us a like and subscribe to this channel. This has been a production of kmmedia.pro. Please visit our website, oddly enough, named kmmedia.pro, for more details about us and our mission, which is to provide great positive programming designed to inspire us all. I'm Kevin McDonald, and I'm proud of these shows, and I truly hope that you'll like them and share them with friends and family. So on behalf of our entire team, remember, be kind